Hello, everybody. Welcome on the Innovation and Strategy blog. I'm Guillaume Villon de Benveniste, your host, and today we're really happy to welcome Ravinder. Ravinder, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. So yeah, thank you for having me and taking some of your time out to speak to me. So I'm the creator of Command Codeless, and we're essentially a no-code education company. At the moment, we teach over 1,000 people on how to build and how to develop products, automations with no code, as novel as that may seem. But we'll get into it through this interview and what it actually means and how it can actually help a lot of people to get started with building, even if they don't have that technical background per se.
Great. So you're heading an educational company that specializes in no code. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, no code for dummies. How would you describe no code? Like, what does it do?
So, I mean, it's an interesting term. So every time someone kind of mentions the word no code or the term, it does conjure up that image of no code at all, which to a certain extent is true. Personally, I prefer the term visual coding because you are coding in a sense, but you're doing it in a visual manner. Hence, the term no code comes into it. So no code can really be summed up in the image of you're not actually writing code or typing it out into a code editor. You're also using visual building blocks to function code. So you might be importing an API. You might be exporting a function, but you're doing it in a visual manner. And it allows you to create all sorts of things, websites, apps, automations. And when it comes to kind of automations and building web apps, I think that's where it gets a lot more interesting for a lot of people over just building websites, which generally is kind of HTML and CSS, which we can't really think of as programming languages. But how it's different from, let's say, real code is that it's, as mentioned, it's not physically writing code. So it's more of that visual element. And we've had visual, there's been tools like this for a long time. It's not something very new. There have been tools like, I believe, Dreamweaver, if I'm not mistaken, could be classed as kind of a visual coding tool. But I think now it's kind of the technology's moved on to create something which truly is available and open to everyone, even someone who doesn't have a strong technical background.
Okay. And so I'm understanding that there are different sorts of codes. There's real code, where you actually do the coding. There's visual code, which is a synonym of no code. And then I've also heard of the word low code.
Yeah.
How is low code different from no code?
So there's a lot of these terms that sometimes I think they're buzzwords, but they help people, me, everyone else, to understand the whole ecosystem a lot more. So if you can imagine no code is literally using, as it is, no code at all. Low code is using very small amounts of code. I mean, and one example could be if you are using, let's say, Webflow, which is a no code tool to create your website, it's possible to insert elements of, let's say, JavaScript into your website. So in that sense, it can be looked upon as no code because you are using a few lines of JavaScript. So it allows you to create, let's say, take no code a step further from where it is at the moment by incorporating elements of code, but not creating a whole file as someone would do if they were creating a JavaScript program.
And then one last question on this matter of no code. Yeah. You mentioned that you were heading an educational company. How much time would it take to get some degree of proficiency in no code?
So, I mean, that really depends on kind of everyone's learning style. And it's something I've been learning a lot more about, learning how to learn. But I think what I start with initially when I teach people no code skills, as with anything, you start with the very basics. So one of the first things I teach is web scraping, which is very useful. And it's something traditionally done in programming languages. And with a no code tool, we use Simple Scraper in the course. And within 20 minutes, someone would have scraped a website. So we are talking a very quick learning curve and kind of students getting that dopamine hit to really understand how no code can help them and then taking it further. So within an hour max, they will have a proficiency in some area of no code, whether that's web scraping, creating a kind of static one-page website, and then taking it further to perhaps import an API, kind of filter down data. But within an hour, I'd like to feel that students who come through the course get a good proficiency with using the tools and technologies.
Okay. But would you say that if you want to get a higher degree of proficiency, it would take, what, 2 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, I say, I personally, I try and always advise students to do at least an hour a day. So by the end of the month, let's say if they're following a 20-hour rule, similar to the book, the 20-hour rule, I believe it's called, they will have that proficiency and they will be fully apt and be able to do most things in no code, whether that's creating a website with a CMS, importing an API and using that data, or creating automations to save them time. I'd say within 20 hours, absolutely max, they will have a very strong understanding of how the no-code ecosystem works and what tools they can use, because there are various tools they can use for different purposes to create what they want to create.
Okay, cool. So thank you very much for this introduction. Now let's discuss the applications. We've already spoken to one another, and you mentioned that there are basically two different kind of people that could profit from no code. You talked about large established companies. So could you tell us how big companies can profit from no code?
Yeah, so I think big companies are in a really strong position to be able to take advantage of no code tools. So, well, every company in that sense is always looking for a way to gain, to make their process more efficient. And in a big corporation, you'll tend to have developers, employed developers. And the way I see this working is a corporation could kind of ease the pressure on their development team to allow a developer to work on a more crucial task, a more critical task that requires the time of a developer only. And then using no code tools and even bringing someone in, plus there's, let's say, a no code developer, which is kind of an emerging role to take over the load of, let's say, lower priority tasks that would generally take a developer some time to do, which is not essentially worth it for them in terms of the amount of companies paying them. So tasks that come to mind are creating automations with tools like Zapier, which can be classed as a no-code tool, or Parabola. And the automations can be very simple, or they can be created in a very complex way if the automation's over a longer sequence.
Yeah, just a quick question. So you've used the word automation several times.
Yeah.
Could you give us an example of what you would be automating with no code?
Sure. So for example, let's say in a corporation sense, let's say someone submits a request for more information or for a proposal or a quote. That essentially could be automated in the sense that once it goes through the system, it gets filtered down and it gets put into the right category for the right person to handle, rather than it going through a manual stage of the query coming in, someone scanning the query, looking at it, and then sending it to the right place. So even though that's not a very profound automation, it saves time, time that can be spent on something far more productive, or whether it's social media or to automation.
So wait, let's go through this example. Could we go through this first example? So you're getting like an IT request, for example. Let's just take it very basic. I'm working in marketing, and I'm not getting, I'm not getting something to work on some tool. So I type in an IT request, and then the automated system that you've built with no code is able to read that message in a sense and send it out to the person that would be most competent to answer my question. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a sense, you could do that. So with a ticket system like that, you'd kind of have some predefined fields.
And is that easy to build, or?
Depending on the complexity of the form, but it wouldn't be very. There are tools out there that could build that. For example, you could use a combination of Airtable, which kind of acts like a Google Sheets database, but on steroids, and Zapier to kind of function that automation. but I can't imagine something as that, such as this ticket system, would be difficult to build out in no code.
That would be difficult or not
No,
difficult?
it would. I couldn't imagine it would be difficult to build out in no code.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe just a quick technical question, because I've heard of companies that do ticketing, and I was told that they use natural language processing, and you seem to be using something else. Maybe I don't have a technical background, so you talked about more of like a Google Excel like document. Is it natural language processing, or is it
as far as I'm aware, in terms of the tools that will be used, I wouldn't be aware of what's working underneath those tools if there is some natural language processing.
Okay.
But what I'm assuming is with the companies that do use natural language processing, those would be more complex, let's say ticketing systems, where the actual request would have to be scanned.
I understand.
Just to see what the actual issue is.
That's very clear.
Whereas if it was a more scaled back ticketing system, which had kind of predefined fields,
I get it.
Just for the sake of making it really basic, if it was is this a technical problem, or is it a yes or no, true or false kind of thing, then that could be something built with no code. And then that comes back to the example where I mentioned before. For the more complex solutions, it saves the developer from working on a more basic program, which could be created with no code, and frees up their time to work on something more complex. So you've got that time-saving aspect there, and for an employee that you're paying a salary for, who's a far higher salary, you want them to be working on something which is far more complex and where you're getting a bigger return.
Okay, so basically, no code is enabling big companies to allocate talent on appropriately. So the most talented developers, you would ask them to solve critical questions, and those that are starting out and still have to do a number of development-related work, they could use no code to make things happen faster. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct.
Okay, great. So, and then when we talked last time, you also said that there was a second beneficiary to no code, and that was the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us about what the entrepreneur gains from no code?
I mean, in terms of the first thing that comes to mind for me is for an entrepreneur to be able to build a product without a technical partner. So traditionally, if an entrepreneur comes along and they want to build a product, and it is a very technical product, let's say, where it has some technical elements to it, they would require the support of a technical partner, co-founder. But no code tools, Webflow, Bubble, and others, they allow them to build the product. In a sense, you could say the MVP, without that roadblock in place, without trying to find a technical partner to then build their product. So I think it's one of the biggest ways an entrepreneur can benefit from no code. That it opens up this whole new area for them to build their product out without relying on the expertise of someone else.
Yeah, that's actually that's a critical point. As you may know, incubators like Y Combinator have specialized in technical founders, and this was in a moment where perhaps there was a need for technical founders because the technological barrier was so high that anybody without technical expertise could not start a business on his own. And as you said, he'd have to sort of team up with a technical co-founder.
Yeah, most definitely. So yeah, this reduces that barrier to entry, so to speak, for someone to get started with validating their product. And if they do find that kind of, let's say, custom code is needed further down the line,
yes,
at least the kind of the product is proved then with no code, which kind of puts them in a much more stronger position.
That's very clear. Okay, well, look, thank you very much for sharing your views. Let me try to summarize your ideas in a few words, and correct me if I'm getting it wrong. But basically, you said that no code has been around for a long time, but the technology has moved up recently. A synonym to no code is visual coding. It's different from real code, where you actually program and write the code on your own. It can help big companies reallocate talent and have talented developers work on critical business issues, and onboard somebody else with no code skills to work on less critical issues. So it's a way to allocate resources efficiently. And for the entrepreneur, the difference, the gains are considerable, because the non-technical founder could actually do the MVP on his own. Is that a correct summary of your ideas, Ravinder?
That's a fantastic summary of no code.
And I forgot to say that you've actually founded your own educational company. It's teaching no code.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, well, look, Ravinder, thank you very much for sharing your ideas, and I wish you all the best, and talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.